And welcome to this bite-sized session which will cover the basics of personal data breaches, including what a breach is, how to deal with one, and who needs to know about it. So what is a personal data breach? Well, a personal data breach is defined as a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure of, or access to personal data. And a personal data breach can be broadly defined as a security incident that has affected the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of personal data. Some examples of a common data breach can include personal data being sent to the wrong recipient, personal data being accessed or used without permission, cyber attacks which may lead to compromises of data or data being unavailable, the loss or theft of paperwork or devices, and the failure to redact information. If you discover that you've had a personal data breach, here's how to deal with it. Firstly, when you discover a breach, you should start a log of events, and this should include when your organisation became aware of the breach. If you need to report the data breach to the ICO, it should be reported within 72 hours of your organisation becoming aware. Keeping a log may also help to ensure you report within the necessary time frame. You should find out what's happened, and this includes why it occurred, the data affected, and who's affected. You should also know any steps you are taking in response to the breach, for example, what you are doing to contain it, and this should all be recorded within your log. Finally, you should consider any potential risks to those affected by the breach, and this is probably the most important part of dealing with any personal data breach. This involves looking at the potential harm or risk that could be caused by the incident, and you should bear in mind that the amount of harm or risk dictates whether you should report the breach to the ICO.
So, what do we mean by risk? When you're conducting your risk assessment, the focus should be on the potential negative consequences for individuals. A breach can have a range of adverse effects on individuals. This might include emotional distress, discrimination, identity theft or fraud, financial loss, damage to reputation, or any other significant emotional or social disadvantage to the person concerned. Your risk should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, looking at all relevant factors. So these factors might include the type, sensitivity, and volume of personal data affected. Who's affected? For example, does it relate to any children or those in vulnerable situations? And also how many are affected. You should also consider what's happened to the data and any other action you've taken to mitigate the severity of the consequences. So, for example, any support that you've provided to the affected individuals. And finally, you'll need to consider how likely it is that the concerns you've identified might arise. It's important to note that not all breaches need to be reported to the ICO. You don't have to report the breach if it's unlikely to result in a risk to the affected individuals. Essentially, if a risk is likely, you must notify the ICO. If a risk is unlikely, you don't have to report it. If you decide that the breach does not need to be reported, you should still document it internally. And if you need any help risk assessing the breach, you can use our online self-assessment tool, which is found on the Report a Breach page on our website. Once you've assessed the risk, there are some more steps for you to take. You'll need to act appropriately to protect those affected. So where necessary, provide the people affected with any relevant advice or support. This might include guidance on changing their passwords, advising them to monitor their accounts for suspicious activity, or providing access to a credit and identity monitoring service. You could also consider CFAS Protective Registration Service, which provides people with additional protection against potential fraud. You'll also need to decide if you need to inform the people affected. One of the main reasons for informing individuals is to help them to take steps to protect themselves from the effects of a breach. If you think there's a high risk to the individuals, the UK GDPR says you must inform them without undue delay. It's also good practice in most situations to let people know they've been affected by a breach. This shows you being transparent and that you're taking the incident seriously. However, you should balance any risk to them against the potential of causing any unnecessary worry.
So if you do decide to report to the ICO, you should submit your report using the online form on our website, and you can find this by following the Report a Breach button on our homepage. Using this form will help you provide as much information as possible to help us assess the breach. And remember, reports should be submitted to us within 72 hours of your organisation becoming aware of the breach. If you report outside this time frame, there is a space to explain the reason for the delay. We're aware, though, that it may not be possible always to investigate a breach fully within 72 hours, and in which case you should submit your initial report with the information you have at that stage, and you should provide any follow-up information as soon as possible as it becomes available. If you're an NHS organisation in England, you should instead report via the NHS Toolkit, and there's a link to do this on the Report a Breach page. When you submit a report to us, we'll issue you with a unique case reference for each new report within 7 days, and then we'll assess the information you've provided. In some cases, we might ask you for further information to gain a greater understanding of the incident, and then from there we'll be in touch with our way forward on your case, and we may need more information from you. We may close your case and provide you with some advice, or we may want to consider the incident in more detail.
To help you learn from the mistakes of others, here are some common pieces of advice that we provide to organisations to help prevent data breaches from recurring. You should implement a double checking system. So this is applicable both for electronic communications, such as email, and also information sent in hard copy format, such as via the post. It's important to check the recipient's details, such as their email address or postal address, but also the content, such as any attachments or letters. Taking the time to double check may help to ensure that the correct information is provided to the intended recipient. Here are some specific steps that you can take with your mailboxes to help data breaches from occurring. Disabling autofill. This will help to prevent people's email addresses from populating automatically. While this tool might save you some time, it could result in an email being sent to the wrong person by mistake, so it's a good idea to disable it. Consider using the blind carbon copy or BCC feature when emailing multiple recipients. You should ensure that staff are aware of how and when to blind copy email recipients. If you have a large distribution list or if you deal with sensitive information, you should assess whether using other secure methods is more appropriate, such as bulk email services or mail merge services. Please see our website for guidance on email and security. Where possible, consider encrypting or password protecting electronic documents. Remember, you should use a unique password for each document, and consider providing the recipient with the password via an alternative method, such as over the phone. This reduces the risk of the wrong person being able to access the documents.
Reviewing access controls in place across your systems. Access to information should be granted on the basis of least privilege, and essentially that means that staff should only be provided with access in line with their job role. This should ensure personal data is not made available to any individuals who don't require access. In addition, it may help to limit the impact of any cyber attacks. For example, if an attacker has gained access to your system, the impact to your organisation may be greater if they have access to privileged or admin areas. You should be cyber aware by keeping your IT systems up to date and being vigilant to cybersecurity threats. You should regularly install security updates, use strong passwords, and where possible implement multi-factor authentication. Visit the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre website for further advice regarding cybersecurity. Staff training is also one of the most important things to consider, and this includes data protection training and training on your processes and procedures. Any training provided should be relevant to the role and cover staff requirements when handling personal data on behalf of your organisation. For example, the training should reiterate to staff that personal data should not be accessed or shared without authorisation or a business need. It should also set out your processes for breach reporting so that staff understand how to escalate an incident appropriately. This list isn't exhaustive, and we recommend that as part of your response to a personal data breach, you review whether there are any remedial measures you could introduce to help prevent any recurrence.
Visit our website for our guidance on personal data breaches and our SME hub for specific guidance created for smaller organisations. If you would like to learn more about how the ICO approaches cyber cases, please watch How We Investigate a Cyber Incident. If you need any further advice on how to handle a personal data breach, please contact us as we will be happy to help.